Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Sanford Institute of Philanthropy's June workshop. I'm Angela Beard, and I'm the director of the Sanford Institute of Philanthropy at City University, and we are fortunate to be presenting this through our City U program, Learn with City U. So welcome on behalf of all of us. Sanford, in case you don't know about us, is an institute that teaches fundraising. Our mission is to support the nonprofit sector and help them create greater impact by offering fundraising training and education through workshops, webinars, seminars, etc. All low cost or free. So most of you probably know about that. You've been with us before. But for those of you who don't, feel free to add yourselves to our email list or join our Facebook page, and you will get notified of all of our upcoming activities. Today we're going to talk about plan giving, and I am going to scurry out of your way because we have someone much more qualified than I to even begin to talk about this, Janell Johnson. I will hand it over to you now, Janelle, and thank you for being with us.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for joining today. Thank you, Angela, and everyone on the Sanford team for having me. I am going to go ahead and get my screen share going quickly and we'll get started. Okay, so typically we would be face-to-face having this presentation. I can't hear any of you or see any of you. Please feel free to post any questions or comments that you might have in the chat box, and Austin will go ahead and let me know that you've made a comment. I'm happy to answer questions throughout my presentation. I hope you're well and staying healthy and safe in this environment. I think we can all agree times are a bit crazy. This is going to be a great session this afternoon. If you've been waiting for the right time and opportunity to start your plan giving program, you can wait no longer. Due to the pandemic, and this is one of the only benefits in the silver lining, now more than ever, people, donors, your supporters are home. They're hungry for engagement. Maybe some of you have calling campaigns, you're talking to people, you're checking on them to see how they're doing. But people are thinking about their finances, they're thinking about their estate plans, and they have the time to really take a deep dive into these topics. And also they have the time to talk to you about it. I've had some fantastic donor conversations in the past few weeks and months, just because I'm working from home and that's what I do, and I have the time to do it and they have the time to listen. So I hope today's presentation addresses any hesitations or concerns you may have about plan giving. It can be a scary word for some people. There's a lot of myths, so I hope to dispel some of those myths in today's conversation. Maybe you've already hit go and you have a plan in place and you just need an extra dose of inspiration and support. Maybe you're a seasoned pro and looking for a refresher. So wherever you may be in the process, I believe there will be something for everyone in this presentation. And it's my hope that you'll all leave with more tools for your toolbox and confidence to get started or expand, regardless of the size of your organization or your development team or your annual budget. So first off, just a little bit about me. And sorry, I'm gonna hide this. So I am the Associate Director of Development for Village Theater, which is a musical theater located in Issaquah. Our budget is about $14 million annually. I left Seattle Opera in 2018 to join the Village Theater team after 3 years with the opera. And I think what was most attractive to me about the opportunity with Village Theater was the opportunity to build a plan giving program from the bottom up, working with a dedicated team and dedicated leaders behind me. So as a part of a capacity building grant from the Murdoch Charitable Trust, the theater was able to bring me on board to accomplish a couple of things. One of them was to establish an endowment campaign and build a plan giving program. We're not going to go into the mechanics of endowment building in this particular session. But in short, an endowment is a long-term investment fund for nonprofits in which donors make gifts to the fund and your organization invests those funds for long-term growth. And each year a distribution is made from that fund, typically around 5% to support your annual operating expenses. Again, this is something not the topic of today, but I just wanted to give you some context. Because oftentimes endowment building and plan giving can go hand in hand, which was the purpose of this particular grant from Murdoch. I am also a certified specialist in plan giving, which doesn't mean a whole lot, but means I spent a year in a classroom in California with a bunch of legal and financial experts. So estate attorneys, financial advisors, CPAs, et cetera, just to talk about the financial and legal tools that really define plan giving. So it makes me kind of dangerous enough to talk about these things with you and donors, but by no means am I qualified to give legal and financial advice. So just know that going into this presentation. And I'll talk a little bit more about my CSPG or Certified Special in Plan Giving experience a little later. The Washington Plan Giving Council. I am the president of the Washington Plan Giving Council. I'm going on my second year right now. I'll be done in December. The purpose of the Plan Giving Council is to unite nonprofits and legal and financial and tax planning professionals in philanthropic planning. So we want to increase the quality and quantity of charitable plan gifts by serving as the voice and professional resource in the community. Sometimes when you hear about those big 10 and 20, and I think Fred Hutch had a $30 million gift a few years ago from the Jeff Bezos Foundation. I know that's probably the name of the foundation, but it was his family gift. There was some planning that went into that, and it was the team from Fred Hutch's plan giving department that worked on that. So this is very important work. I also belong to Inspire Washington, which is a statewide advocacy organization to improve access to arts and culture. And then I'd also like to say that I'm a proud Rotarian, so shout out to the Bellevue Breakfast Rotary Club if we have any members on the line. I think I may have a friend or two. So next, just to go through our objectives of this session. And this is what was in the materials that you may have seen before the presentation, but we're going to talk about why plan giving matters to your organization, how to build a request program, the fundamentals of plan giving data management, which is so key, how to assess your organizational readiness. Are you ready for this work? I think some of you might be thinking you're not, but after we go through this presentation, it might change your mind. And then what does donor outreach look like in this space? So this is more of a 101 level course in that we won't dive into any technical gift planning, but even for those of you who have an existing program and want to enhance it, again, I think you'll walk away with some helpful tools. So again, feel free to interrupt. I can't see the text box or hear anything, so I'm just assuming everything is going well. And I want this to be interactive. So again, feel free to chime in and don't hesitate to ask questions. So first off, I'm sure many of you maybe have heard of plan giving alphabet soup, meaning the CRATs, the CLUTs, the CLATs, the CGAs, and all of these tools that can sound a little complex. I don't know if I'm dating myself, but there's this image of Arnold in one of my favorite shows, Different Strokes, if you ever watched 80s sitcoms, and he used to say, "What you talking about, Willis?" when he was really confused. And this is how I felt when I saw all the various gift types that were involved in plan giving. Kind of complex stuff. So, and don't take notes on this particular slide because I'm going to ask you to forget this slide in just a couple of minutes, but I wanted you to have this context. So by definition, plan giving refers to the legal and financial tools used in the gift planning process that really enables philanthropic individuals to make larger gifts to charitable organizations than they could make from ordinary income, with a little thought and planning and support from advisors and you, the donor's favorite charities. And these gifts can offer lifelong income. They can be a part of an overall estate and tax plan. They can be made during someone's lifetime or at death. But the gift models that you see on this page, I want you to know that these are extremely rare. Even large institutions, and I'm particularly familiar with the art space, so I'll speak to that. But in my experience with Seattle Opera, and you know, I have a deep friendship with folks at the Seattle Symphony Orchestra, we're only seeing 2, maybe 3 of these types of gifts a year at most. So again, these are not really the core tools we're going to focus on today, but I did want to acknowledge their existence because I know a lot of people, when I think of plan giving, they go the alphabet soup, right? So plan giving is much, much more than this set of legal and financial tools, which takes me back actually to my certified specialist and plan giving story, which I really want to reflect on for a moment because it's an important piece of this conversation. When I left Arizona in 2015 to come home, I'm from the area, I was raised in Kent. I was the regional director for the Arizona Community Foundation, which is a $900 million community foundation. And, you know, it was one of my favorite jobs. I loved it. It was fantastic. I was more of a generalist. I ran the office. But I said, you know, when I take this next professional step, I would really love to do something in the area of plan giving. It's complex, it's interesting, it's fun, you get to have deeper relationships and conversations with donors and their advisors. So I found the opportunity at Seattle Opera as a part of my, my offer. I asked the opera to support me getting my certification in plan giving, and they did so. So I took this year-long course in California, the American Institute for Philanthropic Studies. Their offices or their classrooms are located at Cal State University in Long Beach. And so it required that I go to California every other month for a year for about 16 hours of intensive instruction in the classroom with all kinds of advisors. And it was a very, very deep dive. I have about 9 books that are about 4 inches thick each, filled with information. And after I got that certification, I felt, yes, I'm so ready. I can tell you anything you want to know about a charitable remainder trust or a chained life estate. And so I got back to the opera and you know, started having conversations with donors, and just it felt like these conversations were going nowhere. And that was essentially because I was leading with the wrong intentions. I was thinking about the process. I was thinking about the technique. I was thinking as an advisor would be expected to think. So CPA, wealth, financial advisor, or an estate attorney whose job it is to really focus on that technical piece. But I wasn't thinking about how does the individual get to a place where they're ready to have that conversation about technique. And I realized after so many failures that I needed to get back to the heart of the gift. So we're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but I just wanted you to have that bit of background about me and why this work is so important to me. Because once I found out how to get back to the heart of the gift and the heart of the donor, things started to change. So it's time to forget this slide, and I will provide a copy of the slide deck in case you want to go back and do some research on your own. But again, I can tell you that it's very unlikely that any of these tools will help your organization's bottom line. And I feel like I just put a bunch of gift planners out of a job. So if you're a gift planner and joining us today, I'm very sorry. There are people who need gift planners. It's just not the majority of donors. I also briefly wanted to take you through some common assets. So this slide might look a little more familiar. Everybody knows life insurance, real estate, retirement plans, etc. You're gonna forget this one in a second as well. So again, no notes. I know it's a little out of the ordinary for a speaker to ask you to forget the important slide they just shared, but this is going somewhere, I promise you. There's just a lot of myths about plan giving, and some fundraisers essentially run when they hear this term. Some donors run. I honestly don't like the fact that it's in my title. I feel like it should say endowment and gift planning or legacy planning. So anyway, I thought it was important to illuminate what plan giving is not for the purposes of this conversation. because I want you to see plan giving in terms of the day-to-day activities you might expect within your organization, and that's going to help empower you to do this work. So again, I'm not going to go into detail about the legal and financial aspects of these kinds of gifts and how these assets are transferred and the various tax implications and gift modeling. But what's important to note is essentially that planned gifts enable charitable people to make larger gifts to charitable organizations than they could make from ordinary income. And what do I mean by ordinary income? Because this is also key to the conversation. So that's types of income such as wages, salaries, dividends, capital gains, any of that income that would be classified as ordinary income and show up on your tax return, essentially. So gifts to your organization's annual fund or for membership dues and things like that, people typically make those gifts with ordinary income or this form of discretionary income. And while they may be budgeted for by the individual, they're not necessarily considered a planned gift. So whether a donor uses cash, appreciated securities, stock, real estate, what have you, planned gifts essentially accomplish two financial objectives, and they can accomplish either one or both. One is they can trade a gift for income, which goes back to one of the gift models. We won't go into that. And it can lower their taxes. But again, that's not what we're going to talk about today, but I thought it important for you to have this context. So what are we going to talk about today? And that is bequests. It's all about bequests. So whereas the alphabet soup of planned giving that provides lifetime income or saves on taxes, there's another type of gift that's more heart-centered. As I mentioned, that is where my connection with donors really took off, and I saw a lot of change within the organization was having this more heart-centered approach. And so this is going to be the focus of today's presentation. Actually, 85% of planned gifts are bequests, right? And if you haven't read the definition, a bequest is a financial term describing the act of giving. So you're giving property, such as real estate or artwork or whatever, or cash to individuals, so people you love, family members, heirs, whatever, what have you, or organizations through the provisions of a will. Sometimes people might have a trust, but it's basically an estate plan. And again, they can be made to family members, even furry ones as seen in the little cartoon, friends and institutions. I like this cartoon. I can't believe she left everything to that stupid parakeet, says the cat to the dog. And love animals. I have a dog myself, and some of you may know people who've left their entire estates to their animals, and that's fantastic. Your estate should go to someone you care about. But I think it's also important to educate people about the opportunities to support these invaluable services that we provide in the community, because people don't always know that they can leave a bequest to charity, and once they find that out, it can be a really heartening thing and great conversation with them. So back to bequests, 85% of planned gifts are bequests. So if the last couple of slides with the various legal and financial terms felt a little overwhelming, you can breathe now. You don't need to have any expertise within your program to run a successful planned giving program that is centered around bequests. What's most important, again, it's not the technical piece, it's the relationships and your internal systems and procedures you put into place to manage these gifts. So we're going to go through what that looks like today. So last important is the technical expertise. And there's one thing that's certain for all of us, and that is the reality of mortality. All of us are going to leave this earth at some point, and isn't it nice to know that what we leave behind can impact someone else's life? One more thing about bequests, these kinds of gifts are really simple to arrange. So back to the tools and techniques and systems within your organization that we'll talk about. Again, you don't need any expert advice to arrange these gifts. You might occasionally, but most often not. And they're pretty simple to report and to track and report on. So you would work with your finance department to do that in some cases, because again, these are gifts that are made upon someone's passing. So it's not necessarily considered an asset on the books or a receivable, only in certain cases. That gets a little bit technical. I'm happy to answer questions, but I won't focus on that for now. So again, you know, in terms of where the donor stands, we want to help people be able to leave a lasting legacy, something they can be remembered by. As much as we can, we want to help lessen the burden of taxes on their family members and loved ones, which most people love that idea. No one turns away from that conversation. And then we also want to help them receive some savings potentially on their estate taxes. So a bequest can be made in several ways. And I just kind of wanted to give you some of the technical language around bequests so that we're all clear and on the same page. So there are essentially 4 basic types of bequests. Many organizations offer this language on their websites. I know that Village Theater does, Seattle Opera does, a lot of organizations provide example language so that it's very easy for advisors to find. They don't have to dig for your tax ID number. They don't have to dig for your address. It's just all there. But I want to kind of briefly talk you through the various types, just so you get a sense for how simple they are. So a specific bequest involves making a gift of a specific asset. So such as real estate, a car, other property, or gift for a specific dollar amount. For example, the donor might wish to leave their home or $10,000 to your organization. So that would be a specific bequest. A percentage bequest, which is another kind of specific bequest that involves leaving a specific percentage of your overall estate. For example, your estate is $1 million and you wish to leave 10% of your estate to a particular organization. And I did include this little link at the bottom as a resource. I'll share these slides so you can click on that hyperlink to see a full resource page on these things. A residual bequest, and I highlighted that one because it is probably the one that I see most often. So residual bequest is made from the balance of an estate after the will or trust has given away each of the specific bequests. So those have to be met first. And by the way, when I say estate, I just mean everything you own bundled together, right? So that's an estate. Everything you own, your house, your bank account, your car, everything is bundled together and known as an estate. And I will say that everybody has a will. If you think you don't have a will, you do. It's called a default will. And the state of Washington will allocate your assets for you if you have not stated how you want them to be given away to the people and places you love. So that's another conversation as well, but be mindful of that every single person in this state at least has a will, and they have a hierarchy of who gets what. So it's a surviving spouse, it may be children, etc. And they kind of go down the list in a very fair way. But it's also nice for you to know that you can dictate how those assets are divided. So common residual bequest involves leaving percentage of the residue of your estate to charity. So for example, someone might wish to leave 30% of the residue of their estate to Village Theater. A lot of people like this option because oftentimes they will leave a specific bequest, a dollar amount or something else, to the people they love, and they want to make sure that those are fulfilled first. And whatever's left over, so the people get their bequests first, their gifts, and then there might be estate taxes, there may be other things due. So whatever is left over is what your organization might receive. So people tend to appreciate that. And then lastly, a contingent bequest. So a contingent bequest is made to charity only if the purpose of the primary bequest can't be met. So for example, you could leave a specific property such as a vacation home to a relative, but the bequest language could provide that if the relative is not alive at the time of the person's death, then the vacation home would go to the charity. And here is just on this slide as well, a simple sentence. This is literally all it takes for someone to include your organization in their estate plans. It's literally one sentence in a will. If they already have a will, they can go to their attorney, or if they're doing their own will, they would just create an amendment or an addendum. With an attorney, you would be developing what's called a codicil, and they could easily make that change and insert that language into your will. And we're going to talk a little bit later about how you can, someone can leave a gift to charity even if they don't have a will.
Janelle, if I might
Yes.
step in for a moment, we have a
Sure.
question.
Absolutely.
So somebody asks, what size estate must you have in order for estate taxes to be a major concern?
Sure. And you know what? I will go over that in just a couple more slides if you can hold on a minute.
Sure.
Because I want to make sure that it's that information is provided within the context of the presentation, and I have some exact numbers for you to think about. So I will definitely get to that in just a couple of slides, if that's okay. But
Sure, sounds great.
Thank you for that question. It's important that you just know a few things as you venture into this territory, and these are things that you should be able to clearly communicate to your supporter. So bequest is generally a revocable gift, which means that it can be changed or modified at any time. So that means if I add that sentence to my will and I say I'm leaving 10% of my estate to Village Theater, then I can change that at any time because I'm, while I'm still alive. Obviously, once you've passed away, it all becomes in force and, it's locked in. But while you're alive, you can change anything you want in your statement. We change our passions, our desires over our lifetimes. We change our spouses. We don't want our ex to get our estate proceeds, which I have seen that happen where someone didn't change the names in their estate and an ex got some of the proceeds. Anyway, that's another story. But the point is that these are revocable gifts and you can change them at any time. We won't go into this in detail, but it's only in the case of a donor who receives an immediate tax benefit that the gift is locked in, and then it becomes irrevocable. So using one of those techniques a couple slides ago, the alphabet soup slide, usually those techniques involve making an irrevocable gift because the donor is getting an income and they're getting an immediate tax benefit. So, but for the purposes of a simple bequest in someone's will, folks need to know that it's revocable. And what we do at Village Theater, and most organizations do, and people call it different things, we call it a legacy gift notification form. So it's something the donor can fill out that just says, it's a double-sided page, and it just provides their personal information, the type of gift they're planning to leave in their estate plan, so little description. Some people provide a copy of the relevant portion of their will so that we can put that on the books. You have to be really careful around asking for amounts, but there is a right way to do it. That's for another day, but you can. Some people are happy to give that information in the case of a theater, because we are running a campaign. That was part of my ask is, will you let me know the value of your gift so that we can help our funders know that we're making progress. So it's kind of a delicate conversation, but it can happen in the right space and context and with the right person. If you know it's a prickly person, probably not something you should say, but you know your donor's best. And then a bequest can also be designated for any purpose within your organization. So that's something that the leadership of your organization typically needs to decide. At Village Theater, we give people the option of, your bequest can support our general fund, our main stage, our Village Originals program, which is for emerging musicals, It's kind of incubator program, and then our youth education. So we say, you know, we want your gift to go to a place that's most meaningful for you. And with most organizations, if the bequest is over $100,000, some people have different thresholds depending on the size and scope of your organization, but for Village Theater, it's $100,000 if someone wants to have a named fund and have that designated for a very, very specific purpose. Bequests are exempt from federal estate taxes. So you should know that. So the IRS, and this gets to that question that we got, Austin, about estate taxes. So bequests are exempt. So the IRS announced a higher estate and gift tax limit for 2020. And that is $11.58 million per individual. So that's up from $11.4 million in 2019. But I think it's important to note that in 2017, it was half that. It was over $5 million, which, so what that means is that is the amount of money that is exempt from taxes. So anything above $11.58 million, any assets you may have above that amount, they're going to be taxed with a federal estate tax, which can be up to 40% of every dollar above that 11.5 million. Hopefully that makes sense. What's interesting is that there are about 15 or so, I think it might be 18 now, states that have a state estate tax, and Washington is one of them, and it's a fairly low threshold. And that's $2.19 million per person. That's the same rate as it was in 2019. And so if you have more than $2,193,000 in your estate when you pass, every dollar above that is going to be taxed. It's subject to a 10 to 20% Washington state estate tax. That's fairly low, especially in this time where a lot of people may have purchased their property years ago, and it's highly appreciated decades ago. We know there's a real estate boom in this area. People may own various pieces of property. So I don't know that it's that hard to reach that level. The federal level is obviously a bit harder at 11.58 million. Not many people are going to be in that category, but I think we'll find a lot of people in the 2.1 range here in Washington. So this is a huge conversation for some people. So if you have someone has a taxable estate, the estate tax charitable deduction could offset or eliminate those estate taxes. And sometimes that results in a larger inheritance for heirs. And that kind of gift takes a little thought and planning, but it's nice to plant that seed that people will have that savings. Does that address the question fully that we received? Hopefully. If not, please chime back in and I'll clarify further. And lastly, and this is really important, some people might say, well, I don't have a will, but they might have something else. I think most people have a retirement plan, especially people, you know, baby boomers and older. Most people have life insurance policies. Most people have bank accounts. These are all assets that require, upon setting them up, what's called a beneficiary designation form. So the financial institution will ask you, upon your passing, who gets your life insurance? And then you're able to say 20% goes to Uncle Joe in Florida and the other 30% goes here or there. And some people break it up. Some people give it to all one person. But you are required that a life insurance company is a financial institution. And so they must have that information. Same with retirement custodians, and they're considered, you know, banking institutions. You must fill out a beneficiary request form. So those beneficiary forms, I'm sorry, not request form, designation forms. Those designation forms supersede anything in your will. So even if your will says, I want my entire life insurance proceeds to go to my son, John, unless it says that on that beneficiary designation form, it will not be honored in your will. That's illegal. The beneficiary designation form is a legal document and the financial institution is required to honor it. So that's an important thing that I point out to people. Make sure that you update your beneficiary designation forms and not just your will, because your will is not going to be honored. The benefit here for you as a charity organization is that these forms can be changed in a matter of minutes. People can log online now, access their accounts, change percentages. So for example, if you wanted to do a campaign that just said, add our organization, add the Humane Society to your life insurance policy, all it takes is 1% or 2%, right? I'd say if someone has a multi-million-dollar life insurance policy and you're getting 1%, that's not bad. And oftentimes people do much more than that. But it's something very simple and a pathway into a deeper conversation. So life insurance and retirement accounts, those are great ways to start the conversation for people who go, oh, I just changed my will. I don't want to do it again. I'm going to change it next year. Oh, okay. Well, would you consider maybe donating 1% of your retirement account? It's completely revocable. You can add us in. You can change it at any time. What's the name of your retirement custodian? I'll log online and pull up the form for you or tell you how to do it. Oftentimes I'll do that to get, people motivated, is I'll log on and pull up this form or whatever it is they need to do and provide detailed instructions for them. So that's a huge motivator. So why is plan giving? Yes, go ahead.
Oh, we had another question. Sorry.
Sure.
Somebody asks, if a gift is designated for a specific purpose, but that program no longer exists when the donor has actually passed away, what happens then?
Usually there is a little clause in the agreement that says that covers those bases. So if the program no longer exists, we will redirect your lovely gift for another purpose that is similar to what the gift was intended for, or it might go into the general fund. And most people don't have a problem with that.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So this is why plan giving matters to your organization. If you look at these dollars, so this is and my slide's a little off here, but this is a infograph that comes out every year from an organization called Giving USA. And they survey the entire country. They release an annual report. Their new report just came out a couple of weeks ago, actually. I think it was June 16th. I want to say it's $150 to download the full report or to get a printed copy. But it's a fantastic report, and it breaks down the entire landscape of fundraising over various nonprofit sectors: religion, human services, arts, environmental issues. So they are tracking all of the donations made to charity, and they're also bucketing them based on where that gift is coming from to help us understand, I think, as fundraisers and just public who are curious, but especially as a fundraiser, this is an incredible tool. So if you look at the bequest giving, I don't know if you can see my pointer, but if you look at the bequest giving section where it says 9% of the $410 billion that was given in charity in 2017, those were all bequest dollars, so $35.7 billion. That's a huge chunk of money and a huge opportunity for your organization. And then if you want to look at the 2018 numbers, that went up to $427 billion, which is huge. So $39.7 billion of that money came from bequest dollars. And the infograph is not yet available. Again, the report just came out a couple weeks ago, but in 2019, they've already reported that number is $449.6 billion. So it's huge, and it's going to keep growing. We've seen incredible generosity during this time of uncertainty and the pandemic. That was quite unexpected. People are hurting. Everybody is going through challenges right now, and a lot of organizations are reporting an outpouring of generosity from the community. So I think that number will continue to go up. But of that $449 billion in 2019, $43 billion of that was from bequest giving. Another thing I wanted to point out was you may have heard this name. He is very, very well known in the plan giving space. Dr. Russell James. He's a professor and director of graduate studies in charitable financial planning and personal financial planning at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas. So he's a fundraising practitioner, and he's also an academic. And he highly encourages gifts of non-cash assets. That's his message, is do not ask for cash, ask for assets. And that really falls in line with this conversation around bequest giving and what assets you might ask for. So he has a white paper, and I'll send you the link to the 25-page paper in the follow-up email. But so his white paper is called Cash is Not King for Fundraising, Gifts of Non-Cash Assets Predict Contributions Growth. So it's a really incredible study. They analyzed data from over 1 million non-profit tax returns. So 1 million IRS Form 990s that were filed electronically for the tax years 2010 through 2016 to really explore the association between various types of non-cash gifts and intra-organizational contributions growth. So this is just a very high-level summary slide to show you the impact of having an opportunity and program for donors to connect to that does not involve gifts of cash. So if you look at that first column, the $100,000 to $500,000 budget size of organization, so the nonprofits reporting only cash saw a 56% growth, and you follow that column down to nonprofits reporting securities contributions, and you see a 400% growth. So, and then you can see what those percentages are down the line and for different organizational sizes, but in each case, that number just gets higher and higher when it comes to gifts of non-cash assets. So if you think about it, think about how much money you have in your bank account right now. I'm on partial furlough, so I know how much money is in my bank account right now. But think about how much you have in your bank account versus the assets you might own. A car that you can sell. You might own your home. You might have a life insurance policy. I have kids. So, you know, many of us might be cash poor, but we might have some assets. And that's the type of thing as a charity we want to be looking for, which is a really inclusive way to look at your fundraising approach as well, because not everybody has that $500, $1,000, $10,000, or $50,000. But you know what? I can think about 2% of my life insurance policy, of course, and my kids get 98%. So I'll share the link to his full paper. Did someone have a question? I thought I heard something.
Yeah,
Sure.
We had another question. This goes back to the discussion about designated beneficiaries. But somebody asks, if designated beneficiaries cancel any will information, then does that mean there's no need to pay to have a will written? Could a person simply fill out the beneficiaries list?
Well, it depends on what you own, right? So there are certain assets that may not have a beneficiary designation form. It's usually only those assets that are held by a financial institution. So for example, your home, there's no beneficiary designation form for your home. The deed doesn't suffice. So it would, the will would supersede what's on your deed. Or whatever is held within your mortgage institution. So it depends on what kinds of assets you have. So yeah, not everything's going to be covered by the beneficiary designation form.
Great, thank you.
Okay. So non-cash gifts. So again, why plan giving matters for your organization. So it's going to help your organization's long-term viability. So this is a long-term sustainable funding source. If you cultivate these relationships and these gifts, you will see tremendous growth and a steady stream of bequests income over time. For example, for the 3 years I was at Seattle Opera, I did some analysis, and the last year I was there, we were actually able to kind of predict what bequest income we would be looking at each year. I think it was around $250,000. So we started to budget for that very conservatively. We knew every year for the past few years it was around $250,000, but we said, you know, let's budget it at around $50,000 into our fundraising goals, and then anything over and above that would be essentially, you know, a surprise, a windfall, you know, something we could celebrate with our board. But it definitely is, if you build the program in the right way, it will turn into that steady stream of income. So it diversifies the base of your support. As I mentioned on the last slide, it really provides a feasible way for every supporter to give back. Again, everybody has a will, whether it's the default will that Washington State provides you, or the will that you create on your own. Everybody can give. And your major donors are often interested in planned giving. Sometimes, you know, you have to know who you're talking to. Sometimes those folks give huge gifts during their lifetimes for a reason, but oftentimes they can be interested in planned gifts. Prepares your organization for the huge wealth transfer that's before us. Every day, 10,000 baby boomers turn 65, and some experts estimate that the transfer of wealth is going to be upwards of $59 trillion. That was starting in 2007 and going up to 2061. But Boston College did a study on that, which I'm happy to share that information as well. And just 36.8% of wealthy households have a will, and many of those people would consider including charity in their will in the next 3 years. And I see getting close to time, and I'm only on slide 12, so I will go faster. So I'm just going to go through these kind of quickly so we can get to the 5-step process here. So I think what we can point out here is that you're really helping your donors to think about their values and how those values align with your mission. Oftentimes people will set up a donor advised fund because they like the idea of transferring those values down to their heirs. They're an advisor, and they appoint a successor advisor, a grandchild, another family member, to carry on that legacy through their giving. Again, we talked about financial planning, tax mitigation, so planned giving can bring to light those conversations. Annual donors become major donors. A couple of years ago, or my first year with Village Theater, and I was setting up our annual Legacy Society event, which I'll share with you in a bit. You know, I wanted to get to know our current legacy donors. We had about 25 or so at the time. And so I called one individual, and because he was on the list as a legacy donor, and I said, hey, you know, nice to meet you. I'm Janelle. I would love to meet you at our upcoming legacy luncheon. And he said, well, what's that about? And I said, well, you know, you're one of our valued legacy donors. We so appreciate your support and your commitment. And he's like, I probably wouldn't leave a legacy. I'm not interested. So I said, oops, somebody took this person's information down incorrectly, and he's not a legacy donor. Well, sadly, a few months later, I got a call from his daughter letting me know that he had passed, and also letting me know that this individual who had given $300 to the organization over the 20 years that he was a subscriber, attending Village Theater main stage shows, and his kids were also in Village Theater kids programs, who are adults now. But over 20 years, I looked up his record. He gave about $300. His estate gift was $70,000. So this is someone who said, yeah, I'm probably not going to do that. To this day, and I dare not ask his daughter if there was an error in which the will wasn't updated to reflect, you know, or the beneficiary form was maybe not updated to reflect whatever was in the will. I don't know. And these can be very delicate conversations with family members, but you know, it's an example of you know, someone who may not give a lot during their lifetime, but they can definitely make a huge impact upon their passing. So let's move on here and just jump into the building a bequest program in 5 easy steps. So first of all, you want to review your internal readiness. It's critical to have leadership of the organization on board with building the program. You want everybody to buy into this at the highest levels. You want support from the other, your colleagues on your development team and even outside of that. So oftentimes you require a lot of collaboration with finance and marketing. So get everybody on board. Start with your closest constituents. Ask staff members, board members, volunteers, hey, would you ever consider leaving a gift in your will? Volunteers are one of the best groups to start with. They're already giving of their time to your organization. You may not know it, but it's very often that I see volunteers who have considerable means. They're taking their time and donating it to your organization because they don't need to be working many times. That's not always the case, but I find that volunteers are eager to have these conversations and they have means. A gift acceptance policy, you want to have that even if it's something really simple. And essentially that's your company's statement on the types of gifts that you will accept. In the case of a simple bequest program, it's going to be quite simple. We'll accept these types of properties. We don't want to accept a piece of land that was a former gas station because the environmental remediation could be too much for us to handle, right? So if somebody wants to give you a piece of land, you want to do some research on that, but it's a broad statement of what the intention of the organization is in terms of the types of gifts you want to bring on. It doesn't have to be the rule of, the final rule, but it's just a guide to help you as a fundraiser understand what your organization's values are. And you could consider outsourcing administrative pieces. That's what I've done with Village Theater. We use a company called Crescendo, which I'll give you a little example of their work in a minute. And then, I think that bullet point's redundant. Determine what types of gifts to accept. So that would be included in your gift acceptance policy. But the key here is that people can bequeath you something you don't want. I've gotten calls about an old rusty car, and those are weird to obviously offload and can be more of a hindrance for your organization. So you want to make sure you're communicating that clearly with donors. Critical to identify the right kinds of prospects. Some key indicators to look for are how long they've been with your organization, how frequently they make donations. Are they giving monthly? Are they giving yearly? Are they giving every other year? What's the value of those donations? On the bequest giving side, honestly, as the example I shared with you, someone gave $300 and their bequest gift was $70,000, right? And they included the theater in their retirement, their IRA, individual retirement account beneficiary designation form, which is how that gift was transferred to us. But so the amount of donations, that matters a little bit, not as much. And then you can also just ask them, is this something you are interested in? So some organizations might do an annual survey of donors, and you can include some questions around legacy giving in that. Let's see. And note that you might be the person in your organization who knows enough about your CRM to pull this kind of data, but oftentimes it might require a little bit of help to get to that perfect list of prospects. Just want to point out what you bring to the conversation. Again, this is all about empowerment. You don't need to know everything there is to know about planned giving in order to have these conversations. It can simply start with, have you ever considered including a gift to the charities you care about in your will? It doesn't have to be, you don't even have to say the name of your charity. You could say charities, which oftentimes people have more than one that they want to support. So in the follow-up materials, I'll definitely provide you with a portfolio manager bequest toolkit with several conversation starters and some language you can use when communicating with donors. And I have another story to share, but I may not have time for that. So I'm going to skip over another story for now. And you can think about some of these things that you bring to the conversation as you develop your plan. So you want to tell people about your program. So I'm going to give you an example of some websites. Some organizations make statements on their annual giving remit slips. There's newsletters. I'll give you an example of that. There's other types of mailers that you can send throughout the year. And then you can also tell people about your bequest programs via other programs. So if you have youth programs or other things you do out in the community, you can always mention bequest giving. Here is an example of a few plan giving landing pages. The one on the bottom left, that is Village Theater's landing page. Again, we have a back office admin support service called Crescendo. So they populate the page in collaboration with us, but they really, I mean, it's fantastic. They manage all the data, they provide the tools, they have hundreds of brochures and different marketing materials on their website that you can customize and choose from. So it's a matter of uploading your photos and your logos and things, and they will help customize those tools for you. And I'm happy to chat with anybody offline who might be interested in that. But having a landing page is key. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There's so much good work happening in this community and lots of examples to help inspire your work. Here's just another example of a piece that I did on IRA giving. I think this was last year, a couple years ago. So on one side was the legacy story. This gentleman unfortunately passed away. He's standing here on a set. We often do set photos with our patrons as a donor benefit. And unfortunately he passed away, and he left a generous gift through his IRA. So I asked his widow if I could include him and their lovely picture, and she agreed and was happy to have their story shared with others. So this went out to about 3,000 households. So one side was their story, and the other side was some information about the qualified charitable distribution, or the individual retirement account rollover program that many of you probably know about. If you don't, I would highly advise you look into it very quickly. It's a great way to get money into your organization, outright gifts to your organization through a retirement account. I will also share that follow-up is important as well. So in March, before the mandated closure of the theater, I started a bequest campaign. And so we put together a list of donors with 10 plus years of history with the theater, people who are subscribers and non-donors, and those who are donors. Again, it's not always your major donors who leave a legacy. So that's important to remember, to think broadly when you're building these lists. So one page letter was sent from our company executive in the mail to over 2,500 people, simply stating his personal legacy intentions, how grateful he was for their ongoing support, and an invitation to join him in the leaving of a legacy. And then the next step was going to be to do a big calling campaign with a group of volunteers to help with follow-up of these 2,500 people. But the closure put that to a halt because we had to reprioritize on immediate financial needs, but we're back on track. And we've re-engaged this group with a gift legacy newsletter, which is one of the tools provided by Crescendo, which again, I'm happy to talk about offline. But I was really thrilled with these results. So you can see the 3 newsletters that went out in May, 2,000 plus were sent each time. And then if you look at these open rates, this is really, really high. 82%, 71%, 58%. We had hundreds of click-throughs on our landing page. So this newsletter integrates with our plan giving landing page, so we're allowed to see what people looked at when they looked at it. It is a fantastic prospecting and cultivation tool. So again, we can talk about offline for those who are interested. Another key piece of this 5-step process is data management. So you want to have a customer relationship management tool, or you can use Excel. It's not necessary that you have that level of technology, but it is a very helpful tool. Let's see, I'll just show you a couple of examples of what I mean and talk you through these very quickly. This CRM screenshot, and this is a fake donor, this is a CRM called Tessitura that's used by Seattle Opera and a lot of other major arts institutions in the area. And, you know, essentially it kind of looks like a traditional moves management system in which you would track, you know, the basic information about the donor, and then you would go through the process of identification, prospecting, cultivation, soliciting, and then stewardship. This goes a little bit deeper into the type of gift, the amount of the gift, when you think the gift might be coming in, and what your steps are going to be throughout the process. Whether it's, you know, you can see at the bottom, there's cultivation steps, and then there's solicitation and stewardship steps as well, which are really key. So the goal is to track as much as you can, but also know when to stop. I can be a data junkie at times and have to remind myself of this constantly. As nonprofits, we're often required to do more with less. So you might have you know, work really hard and put together a pristine CRM and data tracking system, but if you don't have the donor relationships, you won't have any gifts to track or any success to report to your leaders. So that's most important just to remember. Here's another example from Razor's Edge that I won't go into. And here's a real example from an organization in town that is using a simple Excel spreadsheet. They're looking at the group their donors in. Are they a Legacy Society member already? Are they a prospect? What's their constituent ID, name, spouse, and then some notes. Even something as simple as that will suffice. You just want to be able to track the people, keep up with them, and stay in contact with them. And then stewardship. So the purpose of tracking all that obviously is to move through the moves management process and be able to follow up people accordingly. But stewardship is so key to plan giving. Because these gifts are revocable, as I mentioned in some of the earlier slides, people can take you out of their will anytime. So you want to make sure you continue to knock on their door, to visit, to engage, to let them know you're here, and to thank them. A lot of organizations will have annual celebration events for these legacy donors. So for example, each year Seattle Opera would host a luncheon. The last time we did it was at Washington Athletic Club. And so the company's executive made remarks. There was entertainment, pretty big bill, $10,000, I think, to have 50 or so people meet for lunch. But it doesn't have to cost that much for you to do something special. The Old Cedar does the same thing, but on a smaller scale. We use a local restaurant and ask them for an in-kind contribution of food and facility in exchange for some recognition in our program. And they do that completely free. So the cost of theater is zero. So there's ways to get around it and still make people feel special. And if you aren't an arts organization with access to talent, that's totally fine. The goal at the end of the day is to just make people feel special and valued. And there's a lot of ways to do that. And this event also provides a great annual touch point just to check in on people and see how they're doing. This is just an example of something we included in one of our playbills. We had some information about a current show, and in the bottom we had a legacy story about a recent legacy donor. We got photos from his family members and were able to tell his story in a beautiful way. I have a couple more slides here. So just some build up your resources. Professional advisors are absolutely critical to this. You want to know a few, even if it's 2 or 3, estate planning attorneys that if you have a donor that says, I want to give, but I don't have a will. Do you know someone I can talk to? You want to go, sure, I know John Smith down the road. He's really great. His family is wonderful. They've been in the area for a long time. I've had coffee with him. I got to know him, and I think you'd like him too. You might know someone well enough to give that recommendation, or if you don't know an advisor well enough, you might say, here are 3 advisors I know of, or I was referred to, that I will recommend you call and do your own due diligence. So it depends on your relationship with the donor and your relationship with the advisor. You have to have a comfort level there if you want to really make a solid recommendation, but professional advisors are absolutely critical to this work. And this is the heart of what we do at the Washington Plan Giving Council and bridging the gap between advisors and plan giving professionals. So you can kind of read through the rest of those materials on your own. And you can also read through these last thoughts because it's 1:03 and I want to make sure we have time for a couple of questions. So I will just let you kind of browse through these last thoughts on your own. We'll send the slides out. But I did want to provide you with my contact information. Happy to take your questions, happy to have phone calls. I invite you to consider joining the Plan Giving Council. It's less than $200 a year. I think it's $115 right now. I should know that. We are doing an August presentation, August 17th. It's hosted by Schwabe. And so we'll have more information about that coming soon. But sorry to be 4 minutes over. I welcome any questions or comments you may have.
Yeah, thank you again for that amazing presentation, Janelle. We do have, at least right now, 2 questions queued up.
Okay.
One person would like you to speak to endowment and the type of report that should be established for the donor. This is a question that came about 10 minutes ago, so I'm not sure if there was some context at the time. I didn't want to like interrupt your flow with your presentation.
So if you're talking about an investment report and the investment performance, that is something that donors may ask for, or you can even, offer it to them at the time the gift is made and let them know, how grateful you are for the gift and that you will be updating them on an annual basis. I know that we publish an annual report that includes our earnings and all of our financial statements, so people can also find that information online if you have your financials available online. So maybe that's the type of report this person's referring to.
Yeah, great. I'll check in with them.
Okay.
The other question that we have is somebody asked, what do you think about the idea of organizing an education session on legacy giving with identified prospects, as in educating them on the possibility of making a legacy gift to the organization?
Oh yeah, absolutely. People do that all the time. Actually, we did a really lovely collaborative event when I was at Seattle Opera. We did, it was Seattle Art Museum, Seattle Opera, and the Symphony. And we invited several hundred, if not thousands, of legacy prospects. And we ended up with a good number, about 40 people. But the Symphony's Plan Giving program sponsor, Laird Norton Wealth Management, hosted the event. So they did a wonderful presentation. They provide financial services as well as legal services. So they do estate planning. So they gave a fantastic and really robust presentation on everything anyone would need to know around estate planning. It wasn't a hard ask, which was part of the appeal, with us 3 organizations doing it together. We tried it individually and got 1 or 2 people that showed interest, but doing it together, we got a few dozen. So I think there's that power in numbers, and people won't feel like they're being pressured into it. But yeah, people do this kinds of thing all the time. I've been looking at doing something like this with an estate attorney. There's also an insurance professional that I've been cultivating a relationship with. So yeah, those are fantastic events. The opera, we would do those every year. Yeah, great.
Amazing, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if anybody else in the audience right now has any more questions for Janelle, feel free to submit them. Otherwise, if you had any other closing thoughts, you can go ahead.
Thanks, Colleen. I just saw it pop up in the chat box. Colleen is in my Rotary Club. Yeah, it's been a fantastic afternoon. Again, I really wish this would have been an in-person event so that we could have had more engagement. I went through this quickly. This is a lot of information to digest. There's a lot more that goes into plan giving. I hope you'll explore. I hope this inspires you to take a first step or a few deeper steps. If you've already taken that first step, feel free to call me. Would be happy to engage folks. And yeah, just know I'm here as a resource.
So we have a quick follow-up. The person who asked about the endowment report is asking if there's a more in-depth example you could give. So I don't know if you have any more that you can talk about on that topic.
Sorry, I was looking at the chat box. I'm sorry. Which?
Oh, they were asking if there was a more in-depth example of the report for the endowment the question earlier.
So a more custom report. So what I've seen is, and what I've done before is I've created custom reports for people who've left significant gifts to the endowment. Maybe they set up a named fund to support one particular cause within the organization. And so within that named fund, I would be tracking the growth of that particular endowment separately. So then I would let them know, here's what the growth has looked like for the year. Here's the distribution that we took from your endowment, and here's how it impacted our programs. Is
Cool.
that okay? And I see another one from Colleen, a follow on. She says she meant educating donors on the possibility of making a legacy gift. Sure. Yes, you can definitely incorporate that into a presentation. I would just be careful with it, because you just want to be clear up front, not kind of do a bait and switch, not that you would, but just be clear to people that this is an ask. And I want to talk to you about making a gift to my organization. The benefit of what we did with, as I mentioned a few years ago, with the museum and the symphony and the opera, was that we were simply providing information on estate planning and the process that goes into it. And we let them know it was a 90-minute presentation. I think it may have been 2 or 3 minutes on. And if you wanted to include a charity, here's what that would look like. So you want to make sure that there's value in it for them, which is in the follow-up materials. I'll send a copy of the gift legacy newsletter that I sent out that had the 83% open rate, which was huge because it provided several articles and information that people really needed and wanted to hear. So there has to be a value added in it for them. Depending on the kind of relationship you have with the donor, you could say, yeah, I'd like to bring you in and have a conversation about making a legacy gift, but it's nice to kind of prime them a little bit with some information ahead of time in writing, or, via email or whatever. And then someone else asked a question about, without a full-time plan giving staff, what are the top 3 to 4 things you suggest to have success in first year of plan giving? Ask people and make sure you have a way to track them, right? Even if it's just their name. So bequest or legacy prospects, here's a list of all the people I've asked and the date I talked to them, and a little note about the outcome. Once they indicate their interest, you want to follow up with that. Actually, and you'll see in my portfolio manager bequest toolkit that there are some tips around that process, because ideally, my message to my team when I came on board was, plan giving doesn't live and die with me. This has to be a group effort. Everybody needs to be engaged. Everybody needs to understand the terms and the very basics to have these conversations and then I'm happy to be a support person if it gets to a place where it's too technical or you need some support. But I wanted to empower our team to have these conversations, because we can do so much more together if everybody's on the same page and having these conversations, as opposed to one or 2 people within the organization that feel like, we're qualified enough to do it. Anybody can do it, and I feel like it should be a team effort.
So I so appreciate, and I think I speak on behalf of all of our guests, you're willing to spend time with us talking about this really important topic. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me.
We
It's been a
will
pleasure.
be meeting again in August. No, July. Where am I? Does anyone know what day it is anymore? Probably in about a month. So watch your email on your Facebook for that information. And in the meantime, stay safe and healthy. Hope you have a happy 4th of July, whatever that may be. And we'll see you next month.